Hi, welcome to Discussing Fitchburg Now. I'm your host, Sam Squailia. Our show this week is on autism. We're talking about the autism spectrum, people on the autism spectrum. And I have a whole roundtable tonight where we're going to have a free-flowing discussion on what's going on in the autism community, right? And what's going on for resources and what's going on legislatively as well. All right, my guests are Adam Wilson, founder of CalmPassion.
Correct.
Sue Loring, the director of Autism Resource Central.
Yep.
And Laura Shrestha, who's a master's thesis candidate.
Nope, graduated.
Oh, all right. But
So.
you worked on a thesis for autism sensory-friendly design in the architecture world.
Yeah,
right?
sensory
At Boston
integrated
Architectural
design for
College.
not just autism, but those who have any type of sensory processing disorder, because it's such a large spectrum of people that are not thought of.
Yeah.
And trying to change how these people have to go to these spaces, like school, hospitals, higher education. So.
Because, you know, we design spaces for handicap, for physical handicaps.
Yes.
But we don't think, you know, as building designers, we never think to design for sensory issues.
Especially in spaces where they have to go to. You have to go to school. Unless you homeschool, you have to go to the hospital. We go to the hospital more on average than a normal neurotypical person. But those hospitals are designed for neurotypical people. And they're designed for physical disabilities, but they're not designed for us who have sensory processing disorders. I say us because I have ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive impulsive inattentive disorder. Well, I think that's what she said. She had really shiny earrings, and I was kind of like paying attention to that. So, and then I'm dyslexic. So going to school, we went to school together, was interesting because I saw things completely different than you did, and no one else could see it, and it was really aggravating. So hopefully this will help.
Yeah. And you also have two sons that are on the spectrum.
Yeah, I have one nonverbal and then one who is verbal, 7 and 4. They're both interesting. I've figured out the best way of trying out things is watching what they do and then replicating it. So if something should happen in public and they start freaking out, if I look around and just pay attention to what is around me and what reactions happen, pay attention to your senses. It's the same thing. We all have sensory processing disorders. How many times have you gone and looked for an address of a place you've never been to, and as you get closer to the address, you turn down the radio to see where you're going? We all have this, but they have it at a higher level than we do, and while we can control it, turning down the radio, they can't. It just gets louder, and it's that song you hate as you get closer. So
That song you can't get out of your head.
yeah, and you know, and so that's what it's like. So.
Yeah. So, do you I know Laura has heard of you, Sue. Do you work with, you know, the built environment at all? I find this extremely interesting.
It is not something that the Resource Center does. The Resource Center is one of 7 centers across the state, funded in part by the Department of Developmental Services, to meet the needs of families with loved ones with autism. And initially it was families with children. And, you know, in DDS world, services stopped, the Department of Developmental Services, I should say, I tend to speak in acronyms.
Yeah?
Services ended for children at age 18 but autism doesn't go away.
No.
So when all of the kids who started out with the center 20 years ago started turning 15, 16, 17, 18, we began to expand what we were offering for services to that age group and beyond. And then with the Autism Omnibus Bill in 2014, which came out of the findings of the first Commission on Autism for the governor, we expanded the eligibility for individuals with autism spectrum disorder to include people who had no intellectual disability, but for whom the sensory issues, the executive functioning disorders made it so difficult for them to live independently that they had functional limitations. And so now we're serving adults with autism only.
What's an example of a limitation as you described, like a sensory link?
Well, I'll give you an example because I was at the State House today for the Department of Developmental Services annual awards, and it was about kids turning 22 and what people were putting together for a life beyond school. And that's a huge, it's like falling off the cliff sometimes, but we're doing better at it. And we had a number of families there who had individuals with autism because autism is the most prevalent disability nowadays. And everybody was there and everybody was applauding. And you would see everybody in the, like this. And I looked and I said, next strategic, I serve on the statewide advisory board to DDS, and I said, next board meeting, we talk about these things, and we no longer are going to do this. We're going to have to do this because we have too many people in the room for whom that clapping is overwhelming, and we're hurting them.
It bothers.
Yeah, so, you know, this is the accepted alternative to clapping. This is applause in autism world.
So it's kind of like jazz hands, except the other way?
Yep.
Well, it's also what they use in deaf communities for applause.
Applause.
Oh, this is applause in sign language?
Yes.
So we use a lot of sign language for
nonverbal kids.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and that's our way of communicating. So, Patty Manzel, who is my go-to on all things autism sensory, told me that, described to me, it's like when she walks into the hospital to go for her visit, from the lobby all the way to the meeting, she loses her ability to read, to talk, she has dyscalculia, which is a form of dyslexia, so she can't tell numbers. Her vision becomes blurred, and then all of a sudden she'll bolt or elope. And she'll come to in the middle of traffic with cars honking at her with no idea who she was, how she got there.
Because it's too loud, it's too bright.
Yep.
It's too overwhelming.
It's too overwhelming. And you go into...
The smell? Does the smell affect?
It's a fight or flight.
Yep.
Smell can do it also.
Yeah.
It's a fight or flight. So you have that washing over like you would if you're startled and scared.
Yeah.
And there's really nobody to fight with when it's just sensory stuff hitting you.
Yeah.
So it's flight. Get me out of here. I need a place that's less overwhelming.
Or they can shut down where they just hit the floor and
Yep.
they're
Pass out.
thrown out. And
Not
no,
pass out, just down.
They're just sitting there. And my son NC's done this twice in the middle of children's hospital traffic where he's just laid down in the middle of the street and refused to get up.
And he's heavy.
He is very heavy. So we actually have a behavioral response team that we call that Boston Children's has set up for him. So his bolting we can watch for. We have security there because my husband was almost hit by a car because
He was chasing.
he had my son over the shoulder, and this woman saw this man carrying this child kicking and screaming out of the building.
Of course.
And she
that doesn't
assumed
look good.
Yeah, so she tried to solve this problem by hitting my husband with her car.
Oh my.
And she just tapped his leg, but and my husband didn't think anything of it. He thought she didn't see him, and she was getting out of the car to. I was like, no, that's his kid. What were you gonna do? Putting him in the hospital would solve this problem? No, it would make it worse. So we have security there now because we know eventually they're gonna be called. So we have therapy dogs. We have 2 people with us because he can't go through regular lobby because it's not designed for him. We have to go through the hospital staff stuff so we could cut down on anybody else getting hurt and him. So, but it's a whole process getting him through for visits. So.
And the converse is usually true. If you have to go into an ER and somebody starts to lose it, they call security. Everybody's going to put hands on and take them down.
More.
Yep, and it just escalates the problems.
It's like when they tell you to calm down. It's like, that's not calming.
It's not only the design of hospitals, it is the awareness and the understanding of hospital staff. You know, and I've probably trained about, prior to autism entering my life, I was a nurse. And so I have done trainings for the Mass Nurse Association over the past few years to about 1,200 nurses. So they have an awareness of what you need to think about when somebody presents with autism. Your patient has autism.
Do you start with recognizing the signs?
No, because if somebody comes into, generally somebody's with them and you know they have autism, doesn't mean you're going to do the right thing just because you've heard that they have autism. Because, you know, you may have had an autistic patient before, but everybody's different.
Yeah.
Right.
So, you know, it's that old adage, if
Some
you've met
people
one
can
person
be
with
violent,
autism.
some people can react in different ways. Yeah.
Right,
Some
right.
people can start, so there's the explosive disorder, which is what my son does. He just goes all over the place, throws, hits, kicks,
Knocks
goes
things
crazy.
over.
And then there's the self-inflictor, who will start punching
Punching
and
himself.
kicking themselves and
Bang.
fighting themselves.
Oh.
So,
It's called SIBS,
yeah, it's,
self-injurious behavior.
Self-injurious behavior.
yeah, which we all do a form of that. How many times have you bite your nails, bite your lips when you're concentrating? That is a form of it, but they do it in a more extreme version. And it's normally to calm down the sense that is overpowering them, to give them something to focus on. Yeah, that's the nurses and doctors trying to tell them, where's the
You need to
papoose and
calm
stuff
down.
like that. Yeah.
Right.
You know.
So
Let
what
me
do you?
talk
So
to
what do
you.
you teach? So what do you teach nurses?
Basically,
to do
what I teach
instead?
nurses is if you're in an ER, you know, the kid that comes in with autism, you're going to put him in the same room that you're going to put that noisy drunk in, but not with the noisy drunk, away from the rest of the, you know, a separate room,
Yeah.
down the hall, until somebody can see him. Prioritize him right after the MIs. You want to get him in and out.
Yeah,
you
because
know?
they don't have that weight
They
function.
can't wait that long, and the longer you wait, the uglier it's going to get. And then very simple things like allowing them to look at equipment and handle it, doing exams distal to proximal. You don't want to put hands right on the core. You want to get them used to you touching them, and tell them what you're going to do.
So the-
Demonstrate.
so don't touch.
Right?
Yeah.
You know?
Without-
Don't touch without warning.
Or show
Warning.
or do demonstrate on the parent first. Listen, I'm going to listen to your heart. Look at, oh, mom likes that, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
Well, my son has a thing about blood draws. A lot of kids with autism don't like having their blood drawn
my
at
God.
all.
I don't like having
And
blood.
the only way that he'll allow somebody to draw blood is if they draw it from me first.
Yeah.
So I just
Like
go,
actually physically draw
yeah,
it from
draw,
you first.
draw a vial. Just take a vial and toss it, and then he'll let you do it. And they look at me like, are you crazy? And I'm like, yeah, I am, but do it.
That's what we need.
And they draw from me, and then I go, okay, it's your turn, and he'll go. If they just try and do him, somebody gets hurt.
For me, we get a whole team in there. We all get ready, grab a part, hold them down, but we press them in. See, compression is very big. It's like a big hug for
The
them.
weighted blankets.
Yeah, sometimes they have a papoose where
they.
they strap them in. I know it looks scary, but for them, it's like they're getting a hug all over their body, and it calms them down. And then we all count to 10, and we let go, and then we smile and clap and tell him he was a good boy. Because he won't come out fist flying that way. He'll think, oh, great, I did a great job. And the person that had done the needle that did him harm is out of the room before we do this, because that will be the subject of his rage, because that person hurt him. So they're gone. And
Is
stuff
it
like
Sims
that.
Semla cream?
We've tried everything on him, but he's just so sensitive. So, and it's, yeah, but we do papoose. I know a lot of parents have but it looks so mean, and so I'm like, yeah, but it's like a huge hug. It's like a weighted blanket. So
when we're talking about sensory, designing things for sensory, Adam, you've actually experienced where you go to events, and events aren't designed
No.
for sensory issues.
No, certainly not.
Yeah, so Adam has created an event called CalmerCon, and you've done a series of events prior to this.
Right.
Can you tell us about that?
Sure, yeah. I have a son on the spectrum. He's 15 now. When he was much younger, he wanted to go to a lot of events, comic book events and things like that. There's all kinds of them all over the place. There's several just in this area.
Yeah, Plastic City.
Plastic City,
Comic-Con's
exactly.
coming
Yep.
up in April.
Yeah, good people. So what I was finding was that, I mean, aside from the other experience of being an autism parent, up until that point, that I think what you don't realize until you get out into crowds is that, a lot of people don't realize, is that it's not just the sound, it's not just the lights. There's also, like, when you're in proximity to another person, that's a sense.
Yep.
And so when you get other people on top of you, if it's not in a situation where, it's funny because exactly what you were talking about, like with a weighted blanket or a belt or the papoose, sometimes they need that to get through the situation. But other times, just somebody standing 2 inches too close to them will set. My son, he's not a fighter. He melts down in that situation if he gets overstimulated and has too many people around him. So in that type of event, it's
got a lot of people.
There's a lot of people in close proximity. It's generally in like a big open space, so there's loud, echoey noise all over the place, and it's just really hard for him to process that stuff. And some of his friends too, you know, I've talked to their parents and they have the same issues. So after kind of, you know, beating my head against the wall for years trying to find this type of event that he could go to, I decided just to do it myself.
I'm going to make it.
Yep.
I would call it proximetric space. It's if you hold out your hands, it's the 3 inches away from your fingertips. It's your bubble space.
It's your bubble.
Yeah.
My territorial bubble.
Personal
Yes.
space, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and when you get too close, they'll take a swipe out of you because they're trying to tell you in their way that you're too close.
You're invading.
Yeah, but then there's some that don't have any proximity, and they will climb right
Right
if
on
you're
top of
pretty,
it. Right, like,
on top of
okay.
it.
Yeah.
So, I remember the first time my son met Samantha, he climbed right onto her lap, gave her a hug, and I was like, all right. So
Welcome to the club.
He likes me.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that but if he's around a bunch of people, he does the same thing as your son. He'll take a swipe if someone's getting too close to him, and he doesn't see them as people. He sees them as if a chair is in your way and you push it out of the way. That's how he views them, but the chair is always moving. So,
Yeah.
So like one of the things that we always recommend to school teachers and all is take a kid with autism, put them at the end of a line. If you're going to line kids up so that they have that ability to define their own space and nobody's bumping into them, because they just view somebody bumping into them as an assault and they retaliate in kind.
Yeah.
You know? And it's a disturbance of the proprioceptive system, which is the sixth sense where your body is in space.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how are we going to design an event to, if you know, we can't put every kid at the end of the line if every
Right.
kid, if half the kids are on the spectrum.
Yep. So how I started was I ran my first event just with neurotypical kids, just to figure out how the different activities would work without the issues, you know,
When we
at
say
hand.
neurotypical, we mean normal.
your average kid.
Yeah.
Animals are
average-
setting on the dryer, honey.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
nobody normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Well, okay.
just a term to differentiate between, you know, neurodiverse kids, which is kids that are on the spectrum. And
Neurodiverse.
Yeah.
And
Neurodiverse.
neurotypical.
Yep.
Okay.
So
We don't say normal.
You don't say normal, you don't, yeah.
nobody's normal.
Nobody's
so
normal.
It's
you know.
true. Nobody's normal.
So we started with that, and then the next event we did, I set it up so that there was a certain amount of time for neurotypical kids, and then time afterwards for kids on the spectrum and kids with sensory processing issues.
So you
'Cause-
start. So the event was with neurotypical, and then the
Yep.
second event,
Yep.
you brought in neurodiverse.
Yep. And then we started having, so this was at Family Martial Arts Center here in Fitchburg.
Yep.
And they're great. My son's been going there for about 7 or 8 years now. So they've been great. And their staff is excellent, you know, working with kids that have needs. So started to get
Oh yeah,
them
we got a
used
picture.
to it.
Can we pull this up on the main screen, Mike? We got a
Yeah.
picture of the FMAC.
Yeah, this is the last thing that
Oh,
we
here we
did.
go.
Yeah, superhero event.
This was their superhero event.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, and
And everybody got shields.
yes, yep. They get to use they're kind of like soft fabric frisbees, but I, you know,
Yeah.
designed them so they could use them as Captain
Oh,
America
it's kind of like
shields.
LARPing.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. Yep. And
What's LARPing?
live action role play.
Live action
So
role
the
play. Yeah.
Dungeon-
You can do it
Dungeons
with
and Dragons,
swords and stuff
yeah.
like that.
yeah.
It's great fun. My nephew did it, but it's also really good for isolation spaces. Typically in special needs classrooms, they have an isolation space, which is a room that's padded. When a kid is out of control, they put them in this padded room, and then they close the door, and then they wait for the kid to calm down. That makes no sense to me.
No.
Give them something to focus their aggravation on. When I designed trauma-centered design for at-risk youth, I'm like, well, if you put a dummy and foam swords or something so they can hit and attack that thing, they can focus all their rage on it. And that way they won't come out still upset, and they'll be willing to go in there. No one is willing to go into an isolation room.
But giving a kid something to actually physically punch
That won't hurt anybody and won't hurt
the right
something.
approach.
Yep.
You need to get your rage out some way.
People use
pillows,
what are those things? punching
Patakas.
bags.
Yep, that's
Punching
what we
bags.
did.
Yeah.
We did throw a ball. They could throw a ball at a wall. They could do something, and then the therapist can come and throw a ball at a wall. And they don't have to talk to each other. Studies show that just being near the student and waiting for them to express what is wrong, it'll eventually come. But just sitting down and asking them to talk one-on-one, it's too much anxiety for them to do it. They need something to focus on.
It's another
while they're
performance
doing it.
demand when
Yeah.
you're not able to
Right.
perform because you're overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
So this gives them, it's a Benjamin Franklin technique of the metal ball hitting when he was trying to come up with an idea and he was stuck. He would take a metal ball and throw it on a metal pan and listen to it, bink, bink. And that's what that ball would do, is for them
Like a
to,
calming.
yeah,
Yep.
it's for them to do something, or hitting something with a sword, or just, there's different techniques that they use. So, which is different from stemming. That's completely different.
Right.
So,
So on the event, how are you designing this CalmerCon? What day is it? Can we pull up? Do you have the flyer for this CalmerCon, Mike? Can we pull that up?
I can tell you. It's on April 7th in Gardner, Massachusetts.
Yep.
It's 112 Central Street, and from 10 to 4. And how we've set it up is I've taken the knowledge that we've gained from the smaller events, and we've got a space that it's a church now, but it was an elementary school before. So it gives us the opportunity to have separate spaces for the activities, keeps the noise down, allows us to control the light level more effectively, and it also allows us to kind of group like-aged kids together so they can kind of move as pods from place to place. And we have one person that's in charge of, making sure they get where they need to be. And
So you're going to have smaller groups of kids
Yep.
in like ages. You're going to have dimmer lights.
Yep,
yep. Lights are very important.
So in different rooms.
yep. Different.
For the different age categories.
Yeah. Well, each activity is in a different
Each
space.
activity.
Yep. So
So you're going to
one
move
group
from
moves out,
activity to activity.
another group moves in. Yep.
Ah.
Yep.
How many kids in a group?
Well, we've been doing, like 8 to 12 is kind of the butter zone, as long as we have enough space. And there, like I said, these are, elementary school size classrooms, so there tends to be enough space.
And how many volunteers per group?
We have one main volunteer just to move them around, and then we have at least 4 people in each room running the events that have worked with, kids on the spectrum or other needs kids at one time or another. We also kind of have the benefit for us that parents are in close proximity through the whole time. And I know just from my own experience that parents are the best, resource that you can have with your own kid.
They know.
That you know what's going to happen. You can see if
Like Laura's
stemming
got the
starts.
system.
Yeah, you know the cues. And one of the other things that we have that was really important to me to have as part of this, which is kind of why I needed the space the way that I have it, is we have a chill room where
Calming room,
Yep,
yeah.
if somebody gets overstimulated, they have
You
a
throw
place
them
to
in
go.
and close the door?
No.
No, you go right in there. There's going to be several different things that they can do. There's going to be,
Punch
there is going to be a guy with swords, and there's going to be,
Beanbag chair.
yeah, big comfortable
tablet.
comfortable places to
Tablets.
sit.
Tablet.
Yeah, and we also have a charging station so that people that have their devices that are there, because there's nothing worse than being stuck somewhere when your
Device goes
iPad
down.
or your phone or whatever runs out of battery, and your child is watching something that's keeping them happy, and and that's nobody's going to be happy all the time, but at the same time, if you can make them not be,
Calm.
exactly. So everything that we're doing is geared towards making sure that they can enjoy these types of things. And we also have artists and vendors and just very few, but that's by design. We just have like a few of each type of thing so that they can get the real like Comic-Con experience, but at a level of sensory, that they can handle.
So now is this open to all diverse and neurotypical
Yes.
people?
We're trying
Kids.
to
Is it
keep
mostly
it.
kids?
Yes. Yep. But kids is a broad, term.
Yeah.
We actually have things that can accommodate, up to teens, older teens, because we have other types of things. We have like photo booth, and we're going to have cosplayers there to so that the kids can take pictures with superheroes and princesses and all that kind of stuff. And we also do something that I've done at every event is a green screen shoot, like a chroma key video setup.
Okay.
So, you know.
So like you can be in the Star Wars ship?
Yeah, we did the Jedi things we did, and they had like the Death Star behind them, and they were like fighting each other in front of the green screen. And the last one we did for the superhero thing, we had them lay on a box with the green screen material on it, and they were like flying through space. And,
Oh, cool.
yeah, and you know, we put up a monitor so that they can kind of see what they're doing and kind of, because it doesn't make a lot of sense if you're just like, you know, if I put you in front of a curtain and like, now you're in space, and they're like
look
no,
at me.
No space.
no,
yeah.
people that are, you know, concrete thinkers are like, no, I'm not in space, I'm on a box in front of a screen. But we have it, you know, we put up the screen so that they can see the final product as it comes out, and they go, oh yeah, I am kind of flying through space. And we've got, you know, good reception on all the stuff that we've tried.
So for more information, you have a website?
Yeah, you can go to CalmPassion.org. I generally tend to send people to our Facebook page because it's where I can get immediate engagement with people. I'm answering questions like constantly the last month.
Nice.
Yeah, it's
CalmPassion on Facebook.
Yep. Full word calm, full word passion. Just put them together. So it's kind of amazing, actually. I was hoping to get between 150 and 200 people at this event. And I decided a few weeks ago that I probably ought to put up some kind of registration so that I could get an idea of how many people were going to show up.
Yeah, that'd be good.
And just, you know, we have almost 500 people as of this afternoon registered.
Wow.
And
500.
And more, there's going to be more than that show up, I would imagine. I've been all over the place doing, you know, resource fairs, and I've been getting a real good response to it. So it does open up another set of issues for us as a staff to deal with.
Yep, being able to accommodate.
But we've got some strategies that we're gonna, you know, try to implement and see how it works. Nobody's ever done this before, so we're kind of in new territory, and this isn't going to be the last thing. So it'll all be a learning experience, and hopefully it's not at the expense of anybody that wants to go and have a good time. Hopefully we can make sure to mitigate any overcrowding or overnoise situations and things like that. We have a few different ideas of how to do that, and I've talked to some people in the field on ways to try to set that up. So,
Great.
you know.
Yeah, and the reason why some of the things he's talking about, like lighting and stuff like that, is important. Fluorescent lighting is typical in all buildings. You see it. Fluorescent lighting, they can see the flicker of it, and it irritates them, and it aggravates them. So that's why he's talking about the lighting. The 8 to 12 kids in a room, that's as much as they can stand in a space. If that. You've gone to NC's birthday parties, and we've had 4 or 5 people, and it's not that no one showed up. It's just that's all we could invite.
Right.
Because that's all. And
We don't want to overwhelm.
yeah, we don't want to overwhelm because we don't want anyone to get hurt.
At that, we're going to take a short break. And we have some footage from the Disability Awareness Fair that we attended earlier this evening, where I got this fantastic pin.
There it is.
Yeah.
There it is.
So we're going to cut to that, and then we'll be back.
At Montechusett Vocational Technical School, the Disability Awareness event is underway. Soon we're going to hear from the mayor, and with me, Councillor Amy Green. Councillor, good to see you today. Great event.
Yes, a nice turnout. The venue, I think, is a little easier for people to get to. We literally outgrew the senior center, so this makes for a nice event. 50-plus vendors, I would say, and hundreds of people taking advantage of the resources that are available, not only in Fitchburg, but for Central Mass. So that's the group that we want to capture. You know, I don't think people with disabilities are necessarily at a fault. I think that Fitchburg embraces that. You know, they're a part of our community. We want to hear from them. We want to take care of them, just like we do any other resident. So I don't want their disability to be a disability.
We've seen a number of events, economic development, real estate, at the senior center, of course, and this is inclusive to make sure that all populations in the city and greater Fitchburg area are represented.
Right, and again, you'll see a lot of the vendors here have multi-ethnic, multi-language brochures available. I took a survey for Haywood Hospital, available in English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Arabic. So, I mean, these vendors know how important it is to reach every citizen. So I think that speaks volumes to the vendors that are here and recognize this event.
More to come from Monty Tech.
We've been doing this for 3 years, and every year it seems to grow, and that's the idea. And it's so very, very important that we send a message to the people in the city of Fitchburg and the local community that people with disabilities are part of our community, will always be, and we love them all, and we want them to be the best contributing individuals to our community that they can be. Let's have a round of applause for them.
Fitchburg Community Connections is a branch off of DCF, and it's under MOC. And what we do is we find gaps in resources in Fitchburg, and then we find people or investors to come in and provide those resources for our community. All of this is to prevent abuse and neglect and to bring about a healthier community. So we work on everything from health equity to housing, transportation, and we work with really embracing families and really giving them hope again so we can heal our families. And one of the things that came out of that was Active Life Adult Day Health Center, and so we realized that there was a need for Latino elders in the community, and because of neglect and abuse, they most oftentimes are left at home because they don't want to institutionalize their parents. So we found some investors to come down to Fitchburg and open up an adult day health center that is primarily focused on the multiculturalism and bringing back dignity to those folks who are non-native Spanish speakers. They're also going to just embrace all of community, but the purpose is to fill those gaps in services so that our communities are not suffering and so that we can go to work in peace knowing that our families are in a safe place.
And there's a lot of resources, not always sure how much the community has to offer, but now we see it.
Yes, yes, I know there are a lot of things I've asked questions about because I didn't know anything about them.
Yeah, and this gives us an opportunity to know and to spread the word to other folks that we may come in contact with.
Yes, very important.
And do you come from Fitchburg?
Yes, I live in Fitchburg.
And have been here for quite a while?
Yeah, quite a while, yeah. Oh yeah, I have.
After you think about it.
Yeah.
And what will you take away mostly from today? I know that you've been engaged with some folks talking.
Oh, I can't think of any one thing, but there's just so much information, and I took a lot of handouts.
Yes.
So.
Took a lot of information right here at Montechusett Vocational Technical School. Our City News continues. Here at the Disabilities Awareness event, the community resource event, with me, Amanda Porter, Pause for Psych. Just an incredible name, Amanda. Tell us a little bit about what this is.
Yeah, so we are an organization that's based out of Oakmont Regional High School. We're funded by United Way Youth Venture, and we're all about just providing funding and a little bit of donations to people who have mental illness and may not have the resources or funding to buy therapy animals for their mental illness.
This is very, very important. So many different components of disabilities, and this very much so in the limelight. Therapy dogs, therapy cats, featured here.
Yeah, so we kind of focus on therapy dogs just because it's a more specialized area, and we can get a more precise kind of estimate for pricing and how much we need to donate per person that needs one, but we do support therapy cats too.
Joining us here, Amanda Porter from Pause for Psych at Montechusett Vocational Technical School. I'm Glenn Fawcett.
We're going to pull up that flyer. All right.
There we go.
Here we go. Here's our flyer. The CalmPassion, April 7th, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at Chair City Church, 112 Central Street in Gardner. It's already going to be 500. No, we're going to.
Boy.
Yeah.
Yep.
This is going to be a great thing. All right.
I hope so.
Thanks. All right, and we're back. We're talking about, we have our Autism Roundtable. We're talking about all different ways that we are addressing the autism spectrum, right?
Yep.
The disability, do we call it a disability? Is it disorder?
Differently abled.
Differently
abled.
Yeah.
Differently abled.
Or neurodiverse.
Neurodiverse.
Yeah, I
That
think
sounds much more
because-
positive than disorder.
Right.
I know because you know, they say ASD, but it's like autism spectrum disorder. It's like disorder doesn't sound. I mean, this is the people. You're like this for life. This is who you are.
Yeah.
So calling it a disorder doesn't seem right.
Well, I think that the difficulty with it comes in that it is a spectrum, and you can have people who are severely impacted, who may be nonverbal, who may be self-injurious, who may be unable to do the activities of daily living and need constant assistance and help, to a kid that's graduating from college and going out to work in a field that's of his interest.
And might just have some social
quirkiness, yes. Yes.
And not to say that the person that's nonverbal, who's self-injurious and can't take care of themselves, not to say that they're not intelligent. They tend to be highly intelligent. Look at Carly.
Hard to express it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Carly was nonverbal.
Carly?
Her name was Carly. Carly Howie.
Yep. She's a girl. She was a twin, and she had very severe autism. And one day she was working with her one-to-one, and she typed.
In her teens.
In her teens, and she reached out and typed the word hurt, I believe it was, hurt. And they were like, she had a toothache.
Yeah.
They finally figured out it was a toothache, and they began working with her, and now she types
everything.
Everything. She's out there on the lecture circuit.
Well
she's
spoken.
amazing.
She's very intelligent.
Yeah.
But the thing is that she was stuck because she had no way of communicating. She couldn't do the typical text, couldn't do the sign language. She was self-injurious. They thought that she was of low intelligence because of all this.
Fleischman, that's her last name.
Yes, but the fact is she was very highly intelligent. They just didn't know a way to express it.
In a different way.
Yeah.
And autism expresses itself in different ways in each individual. My son is 33. Oh my God, he's 33. And he's essentially nonverbal.
Yeah.
But he's fairly bright.
Yeah.
And yet, because he's nonverbal, people perceive him to be not bright.
Yeah.
And they underestimate what he's capable of. And, I have a friend who has a son who's verbal and who has his own set of challenges. And my son lived with them for 4 years in something called shared living. And one day she was arguing with her kid because he doesn't like hygiene is an issue.
Yep.
Like, don't tell me what to do. I don't want to shave it.
That's a problem with any boy. But,
no, my kid, 2 sisters had their impact. He's all about get up, shower, shave, get yourself put together. And she said, how did you teach him that? And I laughed and I said, how did you teach Kev to talk? And she said, well, I didn't teach Kevin to talk.
Exactly.
I didn't teach Ed that.
Yeah.
That's who he is.
I've been watching The Good Doctor.
Yeah.
Which is a great show.
He has a form called savant syndrome, which is different.
Yeah. But what he does on hygiene is you see him, they do a montage where he has 2 minutes to brush his teeth, and then the alarm goes off, and then 2 minutes and he brushes his hair, and then 2 minutes and he does whatever else.
But that may also be a form of his executive functioning, that if he didn't have something ringing to tell him to stop, he would continue to brush forever.
Yeah.
There are people who have to have alarms to tell them, drink some water. Otherwise, they'll end up dehydrated, So it's so different in each person. And people have, a set idea of what autism is by the person that they may have met one time who has autism.
Or what's on TV.
Right. And TV tends to sensationalize everything.
Oh,
Yeah.
Go for the savant.
They go for the savant syndrome that's obvious savant. That's the same thing with a lot of people asked the creators of the Big Bang Theory why they'd never labeled Sheldon Cooper as autistic. And they said that they didn't realize, it was based off of their friend in college, and they didn't realize that all these quirky things were spectrum issues.
Really?
Yep.
So they finally said, well, we don't want to label it because as soon as you label it, they're going to say, well, how come your kid is not like this? This is what it is. So they purposely did not label him anything because the spectrum is so wide-ranging. You can't say this is autism and this is not. It's different for everybody. So that's one of the issues that they're having. So.
And then the other thing that happens is that we typically talk about children with autism.
Yeah.
But those children grow up.
They grow up. And very often the things that people think of as, autistic behaviors as people mature, they are able to control their impulses better. They mature. Their neurological system matures, and they look different than they did as a child. So sometimes you see a kid who's horribly, horribly impaired as a child and just can come out of it and function. I don't want to say come out of it, but can progress to the point that they have to tell people, I'm sorry, I have autism, and I need some space here, you know?
Yeah.
And that's hard.
There's things that schools have been doing. I know when I was talking to the William Carter School, which I based my thesis on, was kids with physical and mental impairments, cognitive impairments. And the building that they're in right now is it's amazing that the kids are able to do what they can do, and the faculty are able to get what they can out of these students, because the building is so not built for them.
What's wrong with the building?
The hallways are 6 feet wide.
Too wide?
6 feet wide for a person in a reclining wheelchair.
Too
narrow.
Too narrow, you can't turn.
You can't turn. If there was a fire and 2 kids with you're not gonna.
Ramps, and you're in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
It's not
fire breaks and you can't get over the hump. The kids that are in the walker that have to walk. The doorways are too narrow. They have the checkerboard tile, which is, when I was working on this project, Temple Grandin helped me with my thesis. And I called her and she gave me a 20-minute lecture on the bane of checkerboard tiles and fluorescent lighting, and yelled at me for 20 minutes about these 2 things that is a problem for all these. But I have to commend them for what they're able to do at the William Carter School. It's located in Boston. And I'm hoping that they get a new building based off of my thesis, because they deserve it. They've been waiting. It was supposed to be a temporary building 20 years ago. And they don't have things like a cafeteria. They don't have one.
This is a special education school?
For kids, 7th, I think it's from 7 to age 22, which is the age out.
Age out.
That's
of
what we call
special
it.
education services.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So as soon as you hit 22, it's you age out of school.
Or you get a diploma.
Yeah, or you get a diploma, but you no longer have that safety net. You no longer have that that schedule that you wake up, go to school, wake up, go to school. It's
what happens
gone.
then?
Depends. Yep.
It depends.
Yeah.
You know, services.
What resources are available?
Well, there's the Department of Developmental Services.
Department of Developmental Service, DDS?
DDS.
Yep.
And for some kids, you know, we have a tendency to say that's his autism, that's his autism, that's his autism, and then find out later, like, oh, well, he also has bipolar disorder.
Yeah.
And so DMH sometimes comes into play.
Department of Mental Health.
Mental Health. And
Yep.
for a long time, it was like you had to have one or the other. And if you had autism, you were shunted to DDS, who did not have the expertise that DMH has for some of the psychiatric illnesses.
So now you can
Now they're
contact
working
both
collaboratively together. That came out of the Autism Commission.
Because you don't just have autism.
Right.
You have autism and
Anxiety disorder,
depression,
ADHD, ADD. They used to say you
bipolar
couldn't have
disorder.
both. Like you either had autism or you had ADD. You couldn't have both diagnoses. Now they go, wait a minute, yeah, those kids have this.
Which is funny because it used to be that autism and ADHD were way back when, it used to be under the umbrella of schizophrenia.
Yeah.
And then they noticed that
Schizophrenia.
there's
It was
a link.
childhood schizophrenia back in the 40s.
Yeah. So back in the
Autism.
20s.
Then
and
what was later, you know, diagnosed as autism
Yeah.
was diagnosed as childhood schizophrenia.
because
until-
those kids didn't act like the normal schizophrenics did.
Right.
And the same thing with my disorder. ADHD was considered a form of schizophrenia or a form of autism, but now it's looked at something differently. First, they thought it was just a learning disability. A psychologist talking to you could, you know, really talk it out of you. But they're now learning that after doing a lot of brain scans and stuff like that, but ADHD is a neurological disorder. There is no talking out of, there is no talking to.
Right.
You have it.
You can chemically treat it.
You can do medications. I tend to not like it. I have the thing in my office where my office is nowhere near windows. I work in the dark. I have my noise canceling headphones with just my screens lighting up everything. And the guys that I work with at first used to chuckle, but then they installed dimmer switches in the hallway so they can lower it. And they have people that they know who are on the spectrum, so they've been able to work with how I work, because I can get a lot done if I have the distractions taken away from me. And that's what the turning off light and stuff like that, it makes me focus ahead. So, but it's that, and but the thing is, even after, and the classroom's life skills, which is one of the things we were talking about on break, a life skills lab is different than your home and economics lab. Life skills lab teaches you how to take care of a basic apartment. It teaches you how to do things that you and I know how to do: make the bed, clean the floors, put on pants. It's part of my son's learning ability for his special education, where he has to fully dress himself. It was built into his program, his IEP, which is the Individualized Education Plan.
Because, you know, you've probably been dressing him because you don't know
I'm
how
a
to
mom,
teach.
that's what you do.
You know,
So-
you might not know how to teach,
Yeah.
you know, because, you know, they learn, kids learn quickly how to do it.
Yeah.
But if kids aren't learning quickly, then you just keep doing it.
Yeah, because you do it
It's
to get them
easier
out
to
the
do it
door.
than
You
fighting,
don't realize that
right?
what you're doing is you're
You're
not letting.
enabling them to sit back and be a passive.
Yeah.
I know, for me, it was 16 years.
Yeah.
And one day I took longer than usual reading the morning paper, and he came out from the bathroom all dressed and shaved, and I looked and went, I was not there prompting you. And I thought,
He doesn't need me.
he does not need me. Awesome, you know?
I can live again.
Right, right. So, you know, that's how, you know, they mature and they do pick up
Yeah.
skills, you know? But it's helping, you know, helping families realize that what you're living with when they're very young is pretty overwhelming. They usually have sleep disorders, so you're usually functioning on 2 hours of sleep,
Night
if you're lucky.
terrors. Yeah.
Night terrors, you know, wandering at night.
Night terrors is different from nightmares.
Yeah.
Nightmares are you can get out of a nightmare. A
Night
night
terror, you
terror
can't.
you cannot get out of.
You mean they can't wake up?
They can't wake up. Their eyes will be open. They'll be screaming, but there's no one home.
There's nobody there.
They're
They're
completely
stuck in
asleep.
They're sleepwalking.
Yep,
Basically.
They're stuck in that nightmare.
Night
and you
terror.
don't want to wake them up because you can cause them to have a seizure or you can cause them to have other things. So you can't just go up and shake them awake or try to wake them up. You have to let them go through it, because what that night terror is their brain on overload going through the thing. So you can't wake them up.
Are there any like positive night wake, like when they're you know, they're awake but they look like they're happy?
Oh yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
Like opposite of night terror?
I've
Is
had
there a name
some-
for
Oh, yeah,
that?
it's like, let's get up and party.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
really?
I would like to watch a movie, and you can make me something to eat.
Well, they're sleeping.
No, 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 no. No, they're awake
Yeah.
when they want to do that.
Yeah.
It's like, I want to start my day. I know it's only 1 a.m., but I went to bed at 8.
Yeah. They'll
I'm
wake
ready.
up at 2 o'clock in the morning and like, all right, let's get, like, no, we're still sleeping. So, but there's ways that they were triggering, that night terrors can be triggered. One parent on a forum, no, it was a parent on the forum was complaining about her son's night terrors of shadow people chasing him around the hallways. I go, I bet I can solve this problem in one step, because she was thinking about medicating him. I go, does his bedroom face the street? She goes, yeah. Does he sleep with his eyes a little bit open? She goes, yeah. I'm like, yeah, he's seeing everything as he's sleeping. So every time a car passes, all the shadows are going around the room. So that's his night period. And then he hears people talking on the street. Those are his shadow people.
So he's like
taking
10%
He's aware
awake
as he's sleeping. Yeah.
And the other thing that can cause sleep disorders, a certain percentage of kids on the autism spectrum will have gastrointestinal disease.
Yeah.
And they'll have esophageal reflux.
Yeah.
Now, if you can't communicate well, how do you explain to somebody what you're having? You don't. You just refuse to lay down once
Yeah.
it starts. Like, nope, I'm done.
Yeah.
Or you're hitting yourself.
It's like heartburn.
What is the correlation? Do we know what?
Why? Well, this is a deep dive. There is something called the MET gene, and it is involved in neonatal development, in the production of the area of the brain that does speech, and it's also involved in the production of the epithelium, the cells in your digestive tract. If you have, there's a variant, you will see families who have a high history of other family members with GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease, celiac disease, and you have kids with autism. So, you know, in my family,
So there's a genetic component.
there's a genetic component. So it's the MET gene that we see that subset of kids. That will cause them to go to sleep, and then after a certain number of hours, they have reflux, and it's like, I'm done. I'm not going back to bed. So that instead of some medication to make them sleep, the treatment should be a medication to
Help with their
calm
stomach.
their intestinal
to decrease the
issues.
acidic contents
Yeah.
in the stomach.
We went through that with my son, and it took a long time to get to that point. I mean, these things that we're talking about, the specific genes and things, these are all kind of new
Yeah.
things that have
New
come up.
findings.
Yeah, exactly. So, and you know, also because we have everybody has access to the internet in their hand 24/7, you can check with other people about message boards and things like that. Like, what did my son's going through this? How did you deal with that? And
Right.
we just when I first
It's
when he
a far cry from 30 years ago,
well,
trust
no,
me.
understand, but I mean, even like, my son was an early intervention too because he wasn't speaking yet, and so it's been, an uphill battle, just to get him through the normal kid stuff. Yeah. Is this he doesn't want to go to bed because he's got GERD, or is it because he's a kid that just wants to watch cartoons for another 2 hours?
Yep.
And so there's a lot of that, as a parent that you have to,
Questioning.
yeah.
What
Is it the autism, or is it him being 7?
Right.
Or 15, or
Yep.
but for my son, it was he had absent seizures, and I believe when he was little, Sam used to see this, where he would be doing something and then he would freeze and do a 1,000-yard gaze.
Yeah.
And they're so hard
What's
to
he
detect.
looking?
Yeah, and they're like, what? And and he'll be gone for a couple seconds, but when he would sleep, he would have those seizures.
And the
So-
problem is that people go, oh, he has autism, he's just zoning out. So they don't
No.
do a thorough neurological exam to see, is it something else?
Yeah, if
It's
you're
autism, he's zoning out.
Yeah, if your kid is doing a 1,000-mile gaze and you're calling his name and clapping your hands and flapping and nothing, it's a seizure.
Yeah.
I would
He's
go
having a
have
seizure.
it.
He's
I would
having
go
a
have it
seizure.
checked because
Yep.
it might be a
what do you
seizure.
call that?
An
absent
absent seizure.
Absent seizure.
Yeah, because they're absent, they're gone.
Right.
And it's not like a grand mal where they fall down and have,
Right.
tonic
And they're
and chronic
flopping and
Not
movements.
stuff
one you
like
can
that.
recognize.
They
Yeah.
just
Like,
zone out for a
like
few.
most
Yeah.
things with autism, it's a lot more secretive. Than, it's not overt like a lot of
And parents have to become their own experts.
Yeah.
and advocate.
an advocate.
And advocate.
You have to, if you think that there's something that can help your child, you got to beat that drum until you get some help, because it's real easy to. You were talking about schizophrenia earlier. In the early part of the last century, like everything that they didn't understand, they just called it schizophrenia, and you got put in a box. And autism's been like that for quite a while as well with a lot of things. And you get, like you're saying, you get put in that box, but there's other things that are going on. It's not just, that naming it something doesn't mean that the other symptomology doesn't need to be addressed.
Yeah, like the genetics thing, it's called epigenetics. And they study this from Holocaust survivors. What they did was they studied people who went to the camps and came out, and then they studied their genetic line. And those who went through those stressors, it writes your DNA, rewrites it. So if you suffered from anxiety, depression, all those kind of things, it rewrites your DNA, especially in women, and that genetic code goes on to your kid, which goes on to your kid, and that's epigenetics. You see it in a lot of high-risk youth. That's the reason why you have that cycle that continues. It's not a cycle, it's a genetic imprint, and the whole way of, we just need to break the cycle. It's not that you need to break the cycle, you need to change whatever it is that rewrote that code and change it into something else, which is harder to do than what you think. So
Sounds hard.
yeah. So epigenetics is a big thing, and they're now looking into it and finding genetic anomalies based off of that.
So 30 years ago, you got an autism diagnosis and you were told, call the school.
Yeah.
Nobody was going to do anything for you medically.
So on this segue, in the last few minutes of our show, let's talk about what resources are available to those watching at home that are like, I want to contact some people.
There is a number of resources in the state, and there's the 7 autism resource centers. We happen to be the center for the central part of the state, and we currently have 3,500 families who utilize the center.
So the Autism Resource Center
is in West Boylston, but we serve all of Central Mass. And we do have the information and referral. You know, you need a neuropsychologist that's good with autism, you can call us, we can give you several. You need a dentist that can take Mass Health, we can give you several. So it's about having those resources and then providing families with some additional resources. The sensory piece is very hard to get anybody to do anything with. Most of the autism programs focus on ABA, which is good, has its place. Applied behavioral analysis, it's the treatment modality that's the most documented as being efficacious. But they don't look at that sensory piece. They go, well, that's pseudoscience, and yet we all know as parents know it's not. So
Not
one of
only
the things
that, but
we
neurologists know. They
Yes.
say, hey, your child will have problem with hearing, your child will have problem with touch, will have problem with all this. Neurology knows it, ABA therapists know it, but architecture, the form of architecture I'm trying to do, sensory integrated architecture, there's nothing.
Right. So we need to educate architects.
Yes, which I've been trying to do, and trying to start this new form of architecture to get them to understand that their form, and hospitals, K through 12 schools and higher education, they need to think about this. But we also wanted to talk about when you hit 22 and you go on for independent living, we want to talk about this bill called Nickys Law. You've heard in the news a couple of times about kids that are abused by caretakers. Nickys Law is developing a bill that would be like a sex registry, but it would be a registry of people who have abused kids or abused adults.
Individuals with disabilities.
Yes.
Nicky's an adult.
That's what it's named after.
He was hurt in his day program by a staff member. Nothing prevents somebody from getting fired from one job and going down the road and getting hired somewhere else.
So it's like a sex offender registry database, except for
abusers.
Yeah.
Right.
For disabilities.
Because you can abuse someone, and be charged and go through a court case, and if you're not
but you
found,
can still get hired.
If you're not found guilty, your Corey's clean.
This puts them on a registry. Both my son NC has been abused at school. He's now at a different school because of it. My youngest, Kai, came home with his arm dislocated to the point where the doctor was saying that his arm must have been wrenched, or he must have been jolted at such a level that his elbow couldn't go back into its socket. They had to use a cast.
So we can check out Nickys Law and read about that, and then contact our legislators to support Nickys Law.
Yeah, we want to get it passed because this could help the abuse go down, because we're the most vulnerable.
All right, for the last minute and a half, what are some other resources?
Head Start.
There's a whole array across the life continuum of resources.
What did you mention for your son at 2?
Early intervention.
Early intervention takes kids up to 3, and then they go into the school system. Once we get the autism insurance law passed, kids can get treatment for their autism outside of schools. And so that you have that up until the age of 21 if you have Mass Health, 26 if you're on your parents' insurance. If you become gainfully employed and have your own insurance, you can. There's no cap on it, and there's no cost cap. It's one of the best laws in the country. So you have that. You have autism centers who will create activities for people, social groups. There's
like day programs.
Day programs are generally for people with ID. Intellectual disability, but we're beginning to develop for those who have autism only supports. They're more individualized, sort of self-directed. What you need, let's put the support in there for you.
This is so they can be independent living.
And the other piece that's going on is there's a woman, Kathy Boyle, from Autism Housing Pathways, who has got a bill in so that families can build like an in-law apartment for their kids with autism and have them at home.
Like by right.
But their own.
Right.
You know, their own place and space. So,
all right.
You know, that's awesome.
So for more information, you can contact Sue Loring from Autism Resource Central, and that's in West Boylston. And they'd be a great resource. And then we also have Adam Wilson, CalmPassion, April 7th, the event.
Yes,
and thank you so much, Laura Shrestha, for coming on and tell us about the sensory design. All right, this is Discussing Fitchburg Now. Thank you so much for watching.